Hello and welcome to our Holy Week teaching series. My name is Don Fraze, and on behalf of Forest Grove Community Church, it's my privilege to welcome you, introduce this series, and introduce our lineup of speakers. This week before Easter, called Holy Week, is also known as Passion Week. So why Passion? Well, in context, passion literally means to suffer. So this is the week where followers of Jesus around the world and through history remember Jesus' journey to the cross, his journey where he laid down his life to demonstrate God's love and God's forgiveness for us. So we here at Forest Grove Community Church, during our Sunday morning services, are in a series through the Gospel of Matthew called Kingdom Culture. So these 5 videos that you will see this week will cover the passion narrative of Jesus, that specific time period from Matthew's chapter 26 and 27. So I'm very excited that 5 gifted leaders from our congregation have been willing to share their hearts and be speakers for this week. So they are Ralph Gliege, now retired but always a pastor, Gil Klassen, lifetime youth worker and currently camp director, Jody Enns, our children's ministry pastor, Spencer Meisner, our communications director, and Karen Block, career missionary and spiritual director. So thank you to our speakers, and thank you to all of you for viewing. I pray that this series will encourage you and challenge you as together we journey to the cross.
Hello, my name is Gil Klassen, and I'm glad to be able to take an opportunity to share with you today. My wife, Allison, and I have been a part of Forest Grove Community Church for over 30 years. We've lived here in Saskatoon area for a lot of that, where we've been involved in the past with Youth for Christ and now with Camp Oshkosh. Anyways, that's enough about me. I'm just pleased to be able to share with you a little bit today about the lesson today from Matthew. And we're going to be talking about Matthew 26 verses 17 to 30. And I would just like to read those for you. It's about the Last Supper. On the first day of the festival of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Where do you want us to prepare the Passover meal for you?" "As you go into the city," he told them, "you will see a certain man. Tell him, the teacher says, 'My time has come, and I will eat the Passover meal with my disciples at your house.'" So the disciples did as Jesus told them and prepared the Passover meal there. When it was evening, Jesus sat down at the table with the 12. While they were eating, he said, "I tell you the truth, one of you will betray me." Greatly distressed, each one asked in turn, "Am I the one, Lord?" He replied, "One of you who has just eaten from this bowl with me will betray me. For the Son of Man must die, as the Scriptures declared long ago. But how terrible it will be for the one who betrays him. It will be far better for that man if he had never been born." Judas, the one who would betray him, also asked, "Rabbi, am I the one?" And Jesus told him, "You have said it." As they were eating, Jesus took some bread and blessed it. Then he broke it in pieces and gave it to the disciples, saying, "Take this and eat it, for this is my body." And he took a cup of wine and gave thanks to God for it. And he gave it to them and said, "Each of you drink from it, for this is my blood, which confirms the covenant between God and his people. It is poured out as a sacrifice to forgive the sins of many. Mark my words, I will not drink wine again until the day I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." Then they sang a hymn and went out to the Mount of Olives. So, wow, there's just a lot going on here in what we just read. Of course, Jesus, this was all about during the Passover time. And Passover was the time when the Jews, they were celebrating and remembering what happened in Egypt when they left slavery from Egypt and going into freedom. And it was all about as well just the sacrificial lamb. And Jesus here is kind of pointing to himself, paralleling with the sacrificial lamb. there's just a lot going on. But we're just going to park that for a minute, and I just want to look at the dynamics of the relationship between Judas and Jesus, what's going on here. It's not in this Matthew part, but John in his book, chapter 13, talks a little bit more about this. And actually, when the disciples came in, Jesus was there and he greeted them, and he actually took a bowl and he washed their feet. And he was just showing an act of what it means to be a servant. And this, in fact, shocked them. And some of the disciples were like, Jesus, what's going on? What are you doing here? And, they were just a little bit confused. But there's something about this that intrigues me. And it's this question: how could Jesus wash Judas' feet knowing that he was about to betray him? It just boggles my mind. I'm reminded quite a few years ago, I had the privilege of spending some time with a pastor whose son was shot at a high school. He and his wife had made a decision to forgive the shooter, and it was actually a big story in the news. And this man was traveling schools and talking to young people about freedom and forgiveness and all that stuff that associated with it. And I was able to spend some time with him, and he said some interesting things, a few things that I will always remember. And one of them was he and his wife actually did not engage in the whole trial proceedings of what was going on. They left that up to the courts. And he said the reason for that was, for them, they had forgiven the shooter, but they needed to release the judicial process. They just felt like they needed to be free from them and free from all of that. And he actually indicated that for them, forgiveness was as much about giving them freedom as it was about giving the perpetrator freedom. And it just reminded me that there's a truth that the fruit of forgiveness is actually freedom. I'll say that again. The fruit of forgiveness is freedom. And I think that's what's going on here in the story with Jesus. How could Jesus wash the feet of the person who's about to give him up to die? I think Jesus had already forgiven Judas. Like in a few hours, when he's hanging on the cross, he said, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing." So I think that as Jesus was there, kneeling in front of Judas, washing his feet, Jesus was actually praying for him. In the Sermon on the Mount and some of the teachings that Jesus had about the kingdom of God, he said things like, love your enemies, pray for those that persecute you. And I think right now, right here in this story, Jesus was actually giving us an example. He was living out those words that he had taught his disciples for years. I can picture Jesus sitting there washing Judas' feet and actually praying for Judas and praying that Judas would not follow through with the plans that were in play. Unfortunately, as the story goes, Judas, shortly after that, got up and he left. And of course, we know that he went on and he completed the plan and he betrayed Jesus. For the rest of the disciples in the meal, they carried on with the meal, and Jesus closed. And actually, during this whole meal, this Passover meal, he was turning what was the Passover meal into a communion ceremony that many Christians celebrate today. So today, right now, I'd like to bring us back 2,000 years later. And here we are, and we're looking at the whole crucifixion week, and in a few days we're going to be celebrating Easter, Good Friday, of course, when Jesus was crucified, and Sunday when he was resurrected. And this is what the communion service is all about. And we're taught in the Bible about observing communion, that it's a time of, yes, celebration when we celebrate the freedom that we have through forgiveness in Jesus. It's also a time when we reflect, when we take a moment and we pause and we think about what Jesus did for us. And so I have a question for all of us as we reflect and as we think about the fruit of forgiveness is freedom. There's a few relational things that we need to think about. And first is our relationship with God. And there could be some people who are watching this who they actually, as odd as this sounds, they need to forgive God. Not that God has caused any sin on them, but they feel like God has given them the short end of the stick, and that things have happened in their lives and they're holding this against God, and it's like, how could I believe in a God that has done this to me? And it's not that God needs to forgive them for that, but for them to experience freedom, you need to release that. And in order to really have a relationship with God, you need to release that. And so that might be something that you need to think about. For most of us, and myself included, we need to think about our relationship with God, and if there's sins in between us and God, and communion is the perfect time for us to evaluate that and just accept the forgiveness that we have through Jesus and walk in the freedom that he gives us. But there's a third thing, and it's we're instructed that we're supposed to look at our relationships with one another as well. And there could be somebody in your life who needs forgiveness from you. And I would say that the forgiveness is twofold. The freedom that comes from it is both freedom for them, but it's also freedom for you. And it's when you forgive somebody for what they have done against you, you step into the forgiveness or the freedom that's available. And so as we look at this story and as we consider what Jesus did with Judas that day, let's consider walking in Jesus' steps and walking in the steps of forgiveness that lead to freedom. There's a song that I really enjoy. It's by a guy named David Crowder, and the song is called Forgiven. And I think there's going to be a link to it at the bottom of this video. So I would just, encourage you to maybe take a few minutes and pause, reflect on the video, reflect on the words that we are talking about today, and just consider, where do you need forgiveness and where can you experience freedom? Hey, if you've made it this far in the video, thanks so much for watching. It's been just a joy to be able to share this with you. And hey, if you want to, talk more, if you want to go for coffee, have a call, get in touch with me. I'd love to follow up with you. And if you're looking for a place where you can experience God in creation, that's what Oshkosh is all about. You can call us about that too. Thanks. We'll see you later.